We got Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the classic of classic horror movies. Let's get into it. So this movie came out in 1960, and it is very important to keep that context while you're watching it. Only because we're so desensitized to everything. So in 1960, when this came out, this was a first for a lot of things. This was the first movie to portray a woman naked or like in a bra and panties, which is crazy because it's so normal now, but back in the day, that was fucking bizarre. This was also the very first movie to portray like a killer, like an actual slasher. Like, we never seen anybody get killed on screen like this movie. And last but not least, it was the first movie to use suspense as far as the soundtrack, which is super good still to this day, as a superpower. Nowadays, every single horror, thriller, any movie has a soundtrack that builds a suspense. But back then, that was not normal. That didn't happen until this movie. Now, the acting is 1960 acting. You have to judge that on that scale. Everything evolves in movies, film, acting. Everything has evolved in the past 60 years. But this was good for its time. The movie's still very entertaining 60 years later. Not to mention the iconic scenes this movie has. This scene right here to end the movie and the shower scene, before I ever seen the movie ever, I already knew where that was from and I knew what it was about. Now, to be fair, a huge part of this movie was the twist, which was another something that people really didn't do back in them days. And I watched Bates Motel a few years back before I watched this film, so I already knew what the twist was. But, once again, going into this not knowing the twist in 1960, you walked out that movie theater with your fucking jaw to the floor. He was nominated for 4 Oscars and didn't win any, which is kind of crazy when you really think about it. But just look at that. On IMDb's top 250 movies, this movie comes in at 34. That is fucking great. Not only that, the critics have this at a 97%. The audience with over 100,000 ratings have that 95. Most people have this the best horror film, if not the very best, a top 3 ever, just because of what it introduced to the genre. One person gave this a movie an 8 out of 10 because even though it's still a very entertaining watch, it didn't age as well as some other movies from the 60s that I've seen. But I definitely understand the importance of this film in not only horror and not only thriller, but just in filmography all the way around. But only because the rankings are so high, this movie does not pass the home review. But I still enjoyed this watch. It's still a staple in filmography, and I would still recommend anybody to go watch this film.